Hello everyone, and welcome to the lecture on vector basics. In this lecture, we're going to learn how to construct a vector using the combine function, the different rules about constructing a vector, and how to use the names function to assign names to each element in our vector. Let's go ahead and jump to RStudio to get started. Alright, so here we are at RStudio, and let's discuss the vector. So a vector is just a one-dimensional array that can hold character, numeric, or logical data elements. And we create a vector by using the combine function, which is just a letter C with some parentheses. So let's go ahead and create a couple of vectors. We'll start by creating a vector of numerics. So I'll call this nvec as the variable name, have the assignment operator, that little arrow, and then use the combine function, which is that C with some parentheses, and then I'm going to pass in individual elements separated by a comma. So let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, separated by commas. And notice in my environment, I have nvc, and if I call nvc, I get back my one-dimensional array of those 5 elements. And we can go ahead and call class on nvc, and it'll return numeric, since every element in that vector is a numeric. Let's go ahead and just see a couple more examples. Let's say I wanted a vector of characters. Let's call it cvec, and we'll just go ahead and pass in USA. So U, we'll say S, A, and remember to put in the C here for the combine function in order to actually create that vector, CVEC, and there we have USA. Alright, and if I check the class, it's going to return character. Finally, let's get a vector of logicals, so those Boolean values. And we'll just say T, capital F, which stands for true, false. LVC is true, false, and if I check the class of that, it's a logical. Alright, so something to note here is you may be wondering, well, what if I try to put in different data types into a vector? What would the class function return? So one of the rules about vectors is that you can't mix data types into the elements of that vector array. R will convert the other elements to force everything to be of the same class. Let me go ahead and show you an example of how that would work. So I'm going to create a variable v, and I'm going to try to combine, let's say, a logical true with some numbers 20 and 40. So if I try doing that, you'll notice if I call back that vector v, that true has been converted to a numeric 1, and that is going to be because everything else in that vector was numeric. So if I call class on v, everything has been converted to a numeric. Likewise, if I had put in false, that false would have been converted to a 0 number. Let's show you another example of mixing data types. Let's say I had a character. Let's say just USA as a string, and some numbers, 20, 31. You might be thinking, well, how can USA be converted into a numeric? Well, in this case, what R is going to do, it's going to convert everything else into a character. So everything matches the character of USA. So if I call in class V, now everything in that vector is a character. So it's just something to keep in mind. You can't mix up these data types of elements in a vector. Later on, we'll learn about other data structures, such as a list, which will allow us to mix and match different data types into an organizational array. Alright, with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about vector names. So let's imagine we had a vector of temperature data. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this, make a new vector called temps, and put in some temperature data. Let's go ahead and say 72 degrees, 71 degrees, and some other just numbers. You can go ahead and fill these in as you see fit. 75, so I have, let's go ahead and make one for each weekday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Alright, so these are in Fahrenheit, hopefully. Celsius would be quite hot. So we have temps, and if you notice, if I call temps back, I have an array of numbers, but no names to associate what each of those temperatures stand for. So I don't know if the week starts at Sunday or Monday here. And I want to add that information. And I can do that using the names function. So I'm going to go ahead and say names. pass in the vector that I want to name, and then apply or assign a vector of names for the temps vector. So let's go ahead and start it off on Monday. So we'll say Tuesday, Thursday, we'll say Friday, Saturday, Sunday, SAT, Sun. Let's make sure that last one's in single quotes or double quotes. Okay, so I've been able to assign names to each of these elements. So if I call temps now, notice the output. Now each of these temperatures has been assigned a name. This is going to be really useful because now, later on when we learn about indexing vectors, I can use these names to grab data out of the vector. Something to note is that I don't have to keep rewriting this long vector of weekdays. I could just assign this vector to, let's say, a vector called days. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to press on the up arrow on my keyboard. And let's go ahead, instead of using names here, what I'm going to do is assign this to a new vector called days. So now if I call days, I have this character vector of day information, so Monday, Tuesday, etc. And then I can do this sort of operation. Names, temps, and assign days to it in this format. So usually when you're doing names, obviously we'll get the same result here since it's the same vector. But as I mentioned, usually when we're doing names, you're not going to write this whole long vector multiple times. If you use it multiple times, you'll first assign it to a vector like so, and then use that vector in your name assignment later on. Okay, so let's just go over everything we learned just quickly throughout this lecture. We learned how to use the combine function, which is C, and if you can go ahead and check out the history here on this panel. So we took out the combine function, learned how to use it, learned that vectors can only take up one data type, otherwise other data types will be converted. We learned how to use names and learned about vector assignment. Okay, later on we're going to learn much more about how to use and work with vectors in R. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next lecture.